To the West Canada Valley Board of Education regular meeting for November. Please stand for the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Consent agenda. Did anybody have questions on that?
I had two. I have one. Other warrants. I think it's just, maybe it's not in there. Card number, 48, we're on page 1. 48, 895. Teacher pay teacher.
48. Yeah, that's a resource that we order things from. It's like any other places, companies. It's a company that we order from.
And the one right underneath it. Any particular reason why we did not use a PO?
I don't know the answer to that, other than if that was a company that didn't take the PO. They'll acquire that.
Thank you.
Okay, motion to accept the consent agenda. Jenny first. Cassie second. All in favor? Motion to enter executive.
Administrative reports.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, you want to do your administrative reports.
Sorry about that.
That's okay.
Administrative report was what we consider record.
Okay, so we've been collecting changes for the first 10 weeks for the remainder of the school year. We had 15 students since the letters were sent out who changed to hybrid, and we had 8 students turn virtual. So we've kind of kept a balance with 7 additional kids coming into the building. So not as many as we may have anticipated, but we've had some changes. We have our state visit virtually tomorrow regarding the SEP, the school educational plan. So we'll be talking about what we've been doing in the first quarter, our goals for the year, as well as other things. We ordered our AP exams since we last met, and we gave the pre-SATs, the PSATs, since we last met. Other than that, we're doing instructional walks. Be starting observation shortly.
Just want to add to that too. I think I've updated January. If you didn't catch all that, January regents has been canceled by the state at this point in time.
Oh, yeah. Sorry.
No, I just want to make sure. I've heard nothing about June as of right now.
And as far as the state test, we have to do a practice exam for the 7th and 8th graders in January, as long as that's not canceled between now and then. And that would be math and ELA.
Any other questions for Mr. Broadbent on the middle school, high school at this point? Thank you, Mr. Broadbent.
Ms. Holmes?
On the elementary side, we had 29 families request changes. The majority of them wanted to come full day, which was good news. I'm up to 227 full day students, and then another 92 that are split between the hybrid and the remote model at this point. We've got the same teachers doing the hybrid remote split that were doing them before. I didn't need to make any changes. We do have some classrooms that are full. So we've squeezed a 13th student into a couple of them, but we were able to do that and keep the 6-foot distance, but that's the max we're gonna get in there right now. And aside from that, we're just continuing to move forward. We've got the instructional coach coming in tomorrow, we'll do instructional walks with me, and we're continuing to offer PE to the teachers to improve our writing instruction. And that's pretty much where we're at with everything right now.
Questions for Mrs. Holmes in regards to the elementary school at this point?
Mr. Doherty?
For athletics, we just had our last scheduled game tonight. It was a modified soccer game with Holland Patton. Everything went really, really well as far as the spectators and everybody following rules and doing what they had to do for the whole thing. We can technically play till the end of this week. All of our schedules are completed. try and get one more boys varsity game in because the last game in Frankfurt did get canceled. So far, I've not had anybody take us up on that offer. The cross-country committee wanted to reach out to you guys and just say thank you very much for allowing us to host the league meet. It went as good as it could possibly go. The weather was great. Everybody followed the rules. They came in 2 at a time. We put them in the warm-up area. As soon as the last 2 schools were done running, they exited out the opposite side of the grounds. We brought the next 2 in. They ran the race, and it went very, very well. Just moving forward, now that the fall season's wrapped, I don't know what's going to be allowed for winter sports. The governor's supposed to come out and make some sort of declaration about what would be allowed. If winter sports are allowed, I've heard talk that spectators wouldn't be allowed, just something for us to think about, kind of like you do for the board meeting, some sort of streaming option, so we'd be able to at least put games on the internet so people can watch them from home. Start date for winter sports at this time has been moved back to December 14th instead of November 30th. We've kind of worked out an indoor open gym trial from November 30th to December 14th. We started talking about that, Mr. Shepardson and I and the coaches. Indoor track has been postponed indefinitely for now. There's no indication that that will probably be able to happen just because of the way that the sport is conducted with 20 different schools together at the Dome in Utica, and Utica at this time is not allowing anybody in to use that facility. Bowling schedules, they haven't come out yet, but I do have a call in down to the Gorge 3 lanes about getting us some practices in. After talking to the coach, looking like 1 practice a week, which is 1 more than they've ever had before. This is kind of ideally what he would want. Practice on Mondays, they bowl on Tuesdays and Thursdays for their meets. I'm just waiting for them to get back to me because at this point, the bowling alley doesn't even really know what's going on either. So, as far as spring sports, 2 things kind of came up. The batting cage that we received through the Wattis Foundation, that's supposed to be installed on Veterans Day. We got a crew coming in out of Albany to put that in. We're still missing the motor for it. So if that doesn't show up by then, we'll probably have to reschedule that and do it on a different day. We were just trying for Veterans Day because there was no gym classes that day, so they wouldn't have to be displaced somewhere else while the installation was going on. And the Wattis Foundation actually approved us for the 2nd grant that we applied for, the disc golf targets, so we could create a course here for our PE classes to use. Those were actually delivered today. They're over in the bus garage. That happened right at dismissal today. I think that's all I have in terms of sports. Any questions?
I'd like to say that I attended a boys soccer game. I stood over in left field someplace, or right field, I guess it was. And I wasn't there to watch Mr. Doherty, but I did see he was very well organized. Things went very well, temperature checks and paperwork.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wright.
Mr. Ray?
Any other, who we got? Mr. Wright, yes, sorry.
So during the past month, we had some students that moved from different locations. We had a daycare that closed up, so those kids moved to a different daycare. So we had to change some bus routing. So a few kids were affected by that. They had to change from one bus to another bus. The parents were really receptive of the time changes. So some of those times did change. Starting next week, we're going to go from 8 buses in the middle of the day down to 5. So some of those kids have changed from half-day kids to full-day students now. So we'll be dropping that down to 5, and we'll be starting at 10 at the beginning of the year. So that's probably where we'll continue for the rest of the year, because I believe we're done with the changes at this point. So starting the 16th, we got 36 bus changes, like Mrs. Holmes said. 26 changes, but there's 36 changes. So going that route, at this point, we don't have to change any more routes, but it does change the capacity on some of the buses, so we might have to change some more in the future.
Any questions on transportation at this point for Mr. Wright? I want to thank all of them for their work again. A lot going on here, obviously, with different things, and especially with our changes happening, both principals, our director of special programs and athletics, and our transportation supervisor. A lot of moving parts here that they get thrown at, sort of a puzzle that keeps rolling along. They're doing a great job keeping it rolling.
Okay, now a motion to go into executive session for appointment of personnel matters, including review and appointment of employees and contract negotiation. Sean first. Carson second. All in favor? Okay, we're gonna go on to action items. Part of the personnel report. A motion to approve Shelby Butler, Food Service Director 1, provisional appointment per the 2020-2021 Terms and Conditions Agreement for non-contractual employees effective November 30th, 2020. First, Carson, second, Janine, all in favor? The advisors. Motion to approve Shane Bonney, Musical Director, Step 3 of the Extracurricular Index of the WCVTA Bargaining Agreement. Pete first, Janine second, all in favor? Andrew Duffer, Musical Assistant, Step 3 of the Extracurricular Index of the WCVTA Bargaining Agreement. Carson first, Janine second, all in favor? Patricia Lane, Ski Club.
Hold on, that's later.
Oh, Ski Club
later.
is later, okay, with this. Okay. Moving on to tax collector report.
So in the absence of Ms. Crossett tonight, you're presented with the collector's report. This is the annual report, which the board approves every year and gets submitted before Mrs. Bartlett asks for any sort of approval on this. Does anybody have any questions on the tax collector report?
Okay. Motion to approve the tax collector report. Carson first, Pete second, all in favor? Donations?
Okay, Mr. Doherty mentioned this at the beginning of the meeting. You have 2 donations in here on behalf of the Edwin J. Waters Foundation. If you might bear with me just for a second, I'd just like to read a little bit of this. I'd like to inform you that your foundation's board of directors has approved us. These are 2 separate donations, one for $15,540.56. And the second one was for $3,737.47. One was approved on August 18th, and the other one on October 23rd. This will allow the district to purchase an indoor retractable cage for our, could be used for gym classes as well as our baseball and softball programs during the inclement weather and during the season. And disc golf equipment that will be used for gym classes and for community use as it's set up. Hopefully by the spring we'll get set up. Both letters are included in your packet. Does anybody have any questions on this before approving both of the donations separately?
I have, just, when this is all installed, we're allowed to go and see it?
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, the batting cage can be hanging right in the gym, you can see that anytime you're there, and the trail, we kind of mapped out where we think the cages are gonna go, and it all feeds right down into where the nature trail is.
Motion
Thank you, Mr. Doherty, for that.
Yes, thank you. Motion to accept the donation.
In the amount of
Oh.
15.
Oh, I gotta do 2.
Let's do it separately.
In the amount of $15,540.56. Me first, Pete second, all in favor? And a motion to approve the donation of $3,737.47. Janine first. Shauna second, all in favor?
We'll publicly acknowledge the foundation as well. Take care of that. We're certainly appreciative of that. It's a very generous amount of money we received for that. So thank you, Mr. Doherty, for your work with that. It'll be a good contribution to the school for sure.
Okay, moving to discussion items. Department of Health.
Yeah, so I want to talk tonight a little bit about the Department of Health, a little bit about where we're at and some of the changes that have occurred, kind of phase that into the reopening discussion and our current change discussion that we've had here tonight with our principals. A couple things. a lot of what's going on with the Department of Health and changes that are going to occur, as you heard from our principals, hasn't impacted our reopening plan at this point in time. We continue to follow the same instructional schedules, the same spacing setups, and the same safety procedures that we started the school year. You'll notice that as some of this starts to rise and you start to hear a little bit more as the weather changes and COVID is kind of accelerating a little bit here. Some of the things that you're reading that are being put into place and changes that are happening in some school districts now are what we put in place right from the beginning. So we really don't have a lot of changes. We've been wearing masks in the building, other than during break times or when we're able to do that. So our safety precautions, I'm really happy about where we're at. It's things we're going to continue. I'm happy that we've got some kids coming back into the school because we did have some space. And in our plan in the beginning, we allotted for that to happen, knowing there was going to be some changes. Hopefully, this is the end of the changes for the year. So we're set unless something drastically changes holistically for schools where kids can come back and there's changes to regulations. But under the current regulations, we're where we're at right now, pending any transfers in and out. We do have some classrooms that are a little bit maxed that we potentially would have to deal with if we did get an influx of students from outside the district coming in. There's not a lot of movement going on right now, so that's not a huge concern. I was more concerned with this first 10-week change and seeing how that was going to play out for us. Although there were some changes, there was some larger numbers of changes that didn't dramatically impact what we were doing. I do know in the elementary, we have a lot more kids over there in the elementary because we're getting them in there every day. That's caused some rearranging and some adjusting over there for sure. That's strained that with our other day model with in-person in the high school. Gives us a little more flexibility. So the elementary definitely is tighter. There's more kids there, but that's how the reopening plan was designed to get them here, the younger students here in school every day. A couple changes to the Department of Health, and I'll go through some of these and answer any questions you might have. When we started this whole Department of Health situation, and we had a couple of positives in the beginning, the immediate response to that was, the quarantining of the person who was positive and siblings or people that lived in that house. That's probably the biggest change that's happened in the last few weeks. The Department of Health is not mandating a quarantine until after the positive test now. So for example, when we sent kids out with symptoms and requested or had them get tested, we would also send brothers and sisters home with them before we knew whether the person was COVID positive. That was the original guidance. Department of Health has changed paths with that now at this point, saying we're still required to send those kids home with symptoms, but brothers and sisters in the building aren't going to be sent home until that positive case comes in. That's a change from the original guidance of the Department of Health. So the purpose of that change is that if there is a positive, that exposure has already happened and the quarantine is going to already take place. The real feeling was that there was quite a bit in the first couple of months loss of education for kids in a household who didn't have any symptoms, who didn't have anything going on, and we were sending them home due to the fact maybe their brother had or sister had some things going on. And then when they would come back negative, they were able to come back and we were losing 2 or 3 days, maybe more of instruction for those kids. So Department of Health has changed course with that a little bit. They've also changed course on the 14-day quarantine for the precautionary people. So if you're placed in a precautionary quarantine, meaning you are on a bus or something like that, they've shortened that from 14 to 10 days now. And they're also looking at starting those 10 days from the date of the exposure rather than the date of the positive test. So that can help potentially shrink that amount of time that a student that we're sending home because they're on a bus or in a classroom or not sitting near somebody is able to come back to school. So that's a little bit of a change. When there is a positive case and there is direct contact, maybe in that household, they're still holding strong with those 14 days from the date of the positive to ensure that the virus has had its opportunity to get through that. The other change that's happened, this was more of a state level change. If you didn't get a chance to read that, traveling changes. There were some states, we had a list of quarantine states that you couldn't travel to without testing. Now that's changed with the exception of the 5 bordering states. If you leave the state right now for any reason, you must have a test from that state within 72 hours of leaving that state. And then once you get back to New York, you then have to quarantine for 3 days, and on the 4th day, get a test here and come up with 2 negatives before you can return to school or to work. So those are some changes. That information's been put out, by the district to everyone to let them know those are in place. Obviously, that becomes a little more important at this point with the holiday season coming up and thinking about travel plans. I feel bad because you're kind of giving everybody, negative news with that, but it's kind of the way it is right now. So, I just want everybody to be aware of those travel restrictions and so forth that are going on around here. So with that said, that's really the extent of the Department of Health changes that have occurred right now and what we're managing under. We certainly are seeing around us a lot of things going on right now. I'm a little bit concerned about what's going on around us a little bit, more so maybe than when we talked last month. Closely watching that. There was some Oneida County, I want you to be aware of this as well. There were some Oneida County issues that went on. We could be impacted by that. In fact, we were almost impacted by the Oneida County because that became, if we become one of the yellow zones or the red zones that come in there, and we're connected with those regions, you could potentially get pulled into that in different situations with testing, which could cause closures. So being in close proximity to the region that was being looked at in Oneida County, schools like us, Poland, Remsen, these schools were discussed at least in terms of whether we would fit in that region. I bring that up only because I want you to be aware if anything were to happen like that you could see us get impacted because we're a little bit more bordering on Oneida County, where some of the other districts in our region here may not border Oneida County and not be impacted. So that was kind of an interesting dynamic that didn't evolve, but it was there. So a lot of things going on. I am concerned about what's going on. I wanted to answer any questions you had about our current changes that the administrators had presented today. I also want to talk about the changes with DOH, and I certainly did want to express some of the cautious concerns I have at this point as we approach the winter months. Anybody have any questions on any of that for me?
Okay, capital project.
Okay, I've included in your packet a couple of documents associated with potential capital project, including the schedule and some financials that I want to go through with you. This is something as a board we've been discussing for quite some time, and I mentioned this probably last month or in previous updates that sort of capital projects are in limbo right now with everything that's going on as well. There's certainly project work that's in limbo. There's also financial implications that are in limbo. Next month, we'll start our budget process, our first budget workshop next month. We'll start to talk about some of those things that could or potentially impact our budgets, not only next year, but in future years. But I did want to give you this tonight and kind of go through this to give you an idea of not only the potential schedule if we move forward, but the financials and the impacts and things that you're working under or the parameters you're working under as you make some decisions. If after hearing this tonight and we have our discussion on this, these are continual things that you want me and the business office and so forth to move forward with, we'll continue to move forward. Tonight's not about committing to anything. Tonight's not about committing to dollar amounts or anything like that. It's committing with the conceptual idea of a project in a few years. So with that being said, the schedule you have here, I want to go through the schedule first to give you an idea of what this timeline would look like if we move forward with the next project. Between January and February of 2021, if we move forward, we'll start to assemble some of our project facility committees. And if those of you that were involved in the last project, we focused on some different areas and we got some groups together, teachers, board members, students, and some different people involved to take a look at some things or thoughts on items that may be included in the capital project or items we think could potentially enhance the facility and so forth. And I'll spend some time tonight, not on the items at all, but we do have a few items that are essential for us to complete as well. And that's really where the starting point goes, and then we build from there. From January through June, that's where we would work on, this upcoming January to June. We would just start to determine that project scope. We'd have information sessions, we'd notify staff, we'd have board presentations in here about things we're looking at. And then by June, the end of this school year, we would confirm our maximum cost allowances and our building aid and so forth that would be associated with that project. From July to August, we would prepare our public information on the project. For those of you involved, July, September would also be the seeker time where they start to do the environmental checks and so forth. We'd be looking at September, the following school year, fall, September, for board approval on a project. And then we'd vote on our resolutions. Again, people that have been involved in the project, these are lead agency and determination of significance and so forth. Issue our public notices. We'd have the public comment period from September to November. We'd hold a public hearing in October, and the public vote would be next fall, November of 2021. So that's the sort of outline schedule for preparation for another project and how that would work. So that you're looking at right now, we're in November, we're looking at a year from now would be the actual public vote. Okay, does anybody have any questions on the preliminary part of this? So the next page on this list is the post-referendum phase. So once the vote happens, assuming a public support of the project, from December through August of 2022, the construction documents would start to get developed. Some of the things we're doing, we'd start to put together in our LaChase and Synthesis, our architect would start to put everything together. We'd start to look at our maximum cost allowance. January is a 5-year reset for that, so we would want to get all of our documents done at that point in time, and then have the submission to SED by September. And then from September to January, and that's about the timeline, much shorter right now, currently 4 to 6 weeks, they're returning on these approvals. This is much quicker than, if you can recall, our last project that they're reviewing these right now. From January of 2023 through December, the building condition survey would be required. We'd be looking at SED approval for the project. The bid process between March and April. May, we would award the bids, and then from June through the fall of 2023 would be the construction period. So it seems like it's a long process, but as you'll see, this is how long this takes. And again, I keep saying this, those of you that were involved in that last project, remember, all this takes so much time. The planning process, the financials, and all the things that are associated with this. So although we're talking about it now, your construction wouldn't start until June of 2023. Okay. All right, so if you look at the next page, this is an important page just for your review for tonight. This was reviewed by our financial leadership, Rick Timsing, who basically reviews our financials, what we have, looks at our previous projects, when they're coming off, what our current financial situations are and so forth, and then put together sort of a plan or financial outlook as to what we could expect in this type of project. So before I get to the top chart, I want you just to kind of look at the bottom of this. The 2021 estimated aid ratio would be about 90.8% on this project. That means you're aided on almost 91% of the project you put together. As you look at the top part, on the top left, you'll see under principal balance and outstanding, what this financial outline or spreadsheet assumes is a project, a maximum project of 4.25 million. Okay, so looking at our financials, that would be our maximum number that we could use in terms of developing a project. In our last project, it was a little bit larger, but obviously we had a much larger scale going on at that point in time as well. This is also assuming that none of the money toward this project comes out of our own reserve or our own general fund, and it assumes an overall, for the length of the payment period, a 1% impact on the taxpaying community. Okay, so you'll see this is a sort of top of the line most you could do in this project, and we work sort of from there the other way depending on how we want to do things here. Okay, so we wouldn't want to exceed this, and we wouldn't want to exceed any sort of impact over 1% in any case scenario. With that said, we may not want to do that at all. We may want to assume a project that has zero impact on the tax community as well. which would reduce that number down from 4.2 million to, whatever that number would be. And it's not as easy as saying it's 2 point something, but it kind of is. So if you look at it as, what could we do in terms of no impact on the tax community, you'd be looking closer into the 2 point something million dollar projects. Okay, but I did want you to get an idea of what we look at in terms of financials and where we start from with this. If you go to the next page, this gives you an outlook of our current project situation. It's a chart that it'll look a little confusing to you right now, but once I explain it, you'll sort of understand it. If you look at our current, if you start from left to right, you look at 2021 in blue, that's our existing debt in terms of our previous projects. If you look at 2023 to 2024, you'll see that blue line shifts down lower there. That's the $4.1 million project coming off of the books, which is why the timing of the next project will be at that same time. So you're looking at a 4.1 million coming off, and then whatever we decide to go back on. Obviously, this chart's assuming the 4.2 million that is on the previous one. And then from there, you'll see the existing debt service through there until 2033 when the project we just did comes off, and then you're into red. What I want to point out in this is the timing of this project itself in aligning it with the previous projects that you've done before my time coming off the books and the new project coming on. That helps to limit your impact. We've talked about that before in terms of your debt service. So those are important timelines for us. The other thing I want to point out in this chart is as you follow it from 2024 through, you'll see things stay pretty steady there until 2034. And that's because you don't have any more projects coming off until then. So your opportunity for a project coming off is in that 23-24 slot to do something and get some things done that you want to get done with your facility. Not to say you're not going to do anything for all those years, but what it is saying is that if you're looking to, lose a debt and equalize that out, that's your time period to do that. And it wouldn't change again until 2033. From that point on, you start to look at, in previous years, you did some $100,000 projects and things to keep things rolling. That's why you have that sort of timeline there. And that's why you also had Excel money back then that created a scenario for you as well. So you almost had two different projects pretty close together in your previous project development. So with that said, the last page of the documents I gave you is the tax impact. Again, all the documentation is associated with a $4.25 million project. The one that you always get asked upon is, what's the impact on this per $100,000 home? That's over on the far right. The communities and the townships are all located here. What this would be annually the annual impact on each of these communities as of right now. Obviously, these aren't true numbers, but this would assume that the entire amount is borrowed and a 1% impact on the tax community. So you'll see, for example, I won't go through all of them, but this document, Fairfield, for example, would have an increase of $21.82 per year on $100,000 home. So that's the initial documents that we had in our last meeting in regards to the capital project. Like I said, tonight's not about items. We do have some items, and that'll be certainly a part of that discussion. But does anybody have any questions on the schedule or the financials that I provided tonight? I guess that's my first question. Excuse me. Secondly, then, does anybody have any objection to me moving forward with starting to develop some items and getting together with some more individual cost association with items and starting to, for the next school year, get together with some people to discuss potential items for this project? Any objections to me moving forward with that? Okay, so where we'll go from here then, you see where we're at, you see what, in terms of the outlook going forward. Certainly there'll be a lot of variables involved in this along the way, but I'll be in touch with Chase, I'll be in touch with Synthesis, and we'll start to move forward with some items. And the next time that we discuss the capital project, I'll bring you some of the essentials and some of the items that have been discussed, just so you can get a look at them here. And then we start to get into those committees after the first of the year and start to look at things a little bit closer. Once we get those items, that'll give you an idea of the cost association with those items. That'll help you to develop, how big the project will actually be as well. Any questions? Okay, thank you.
Okay, discussion of winter athletics.
Okay. So winter athletics, as we finish the fall season today, winter athletics is going to be a hot topic. We discussed a little bit about that in the beginning. There's information coming in, right away with this, as soon as a few hours ago. As I mentioned in the Department of Health update, the prospect of indoor activities at the state level right now is really, really in question. Today, it was released, let me back up before that. There's been meetings locally from a local league perspective and meetings regionally from a Section 3 perspective in discussion of when the start dates would be. Section 3 determined that although the state at this point is saying November 30th is a potential start date to have workouts and things like that, that there was some concern over whether we would know, districts would know what winter sports would be permitted by November 30th. So it was approved by the section in the executive committee to postpone the start of Section 3 athletics till December 14th, which is a Monday. That's not to say, as Mr. Doherty mentioned earlier, that potentially we couldn't do some safety first activities, individual workout type things and spacing things in the gym on November 30th. But the actual physical first start date would be December 14th. Now for us, our winter sports teams here at West Canada, as we know, are boys and girls basketball, indoor track, boys and girls and boys bowling. Okay, so those are the winter sports that we focus on. There's a lot of winter sports, obviously, that are out there, from ice hockey and a lot of discussion, volleyball, things like that, that we don't have here. Two of our three sports, I shouldn't say that. One of our three sports is considered a high-risk sport, which is basketball. The indoor track, the track and field, and the bowling are considered low to moderate risk sports. So today, within the last hour or two, they have permitted low and moderate risk sports to move forward. So for us, that would be bowling and indoor track. But I need to stop us there. Indoor track is essentially as a sport considered that. The problem around here and why it's been postponed by Section 3 is the way we run indoor track, and the only way that indoor track can be run here is in large group gatherings and at college facilities. So there will be no indoor gatherings with that many teams together, and there are no colleges that are permitting anyone coming in from the outside, which essentially limits indoor track and the opportunity for indoor track right now. So indoor track has been postponed. That is the same for competitive cheer at this point, which is also a high-risk sport. Postponed right now due to the large gatherings. Things could change, that could happen, in the upcoming months. We could hear differently, but as of tonight, postponed. Bowling at this point in time is going to be permitted. It looks like the bowling alleys will be open. We'll be working with them on safety procedures if we decide to move forward with bowling tonight as a discussion. In terms of basketball tonight, there is indication, although nothing is official right now, that the high-risk sports are not being permitted, which means basketball is a no-go right now for anybody. So whether it's November 30th or December 14th, okay? That could change. I don't think there's an outright cancellation of it by any means. But I do think we'll be receiving information in the upcoming weeks here in regards to, what that postponement date might look like for here. So tonight I was prepared to talk a little bit about some of the things to think about, spectators and when it would start, December 14th and games starting in January and so forth. But I think it would be premature to have those discussions right now until we hear officially about that. With that being said, one of the discussions we need to have tonight, and I'll answer any questions you have about that part before I talk about skiing, is With the potential for some of our winter sports to take place, are we comfortable as a board, if permitted at the state level, to move forward? Are we as a board comfortable with moving forward with winter indoor sports here at West Canada? Sort of the same discussion we had in the fall about the fall sports. Because in the end, we get the regulations from the state level, we get regulations from the section level. But ultimately, in the end, as you saw in the fall, individual districts make decisions about whether they're going to participate or not in that season. Several schools, although fall sports were permitted, chose not to. We as a district chose to do that. I would say we did that very successfully in how we did it. I think the protocols in place were very well done. I think there'll be, if we're permitted, although I can't speak exactly to what that would be, there would be specific, strict, maybe even stricter protocols in place if indoor sports are permitted. And if we're comfortable with moving forward with that, we can then advance forward in anticipation for that happening, appoint our coaches to those sport teams, and move forward and wait and listen to see if this is going to happen. So with that, I'll kind of open it up for discussion with all of you. As I mentioned, indoor track is not something there, competitive cheer is not, so we're really focused tonight just on basketball at all levels and girls and boys bowling. Comments, questions, anybody on winter sports?
Well, our hands are gonna be tied, what we can and can't do, so
Sure.
we might just as well do what we can do, right? You gotta give them something to do, or try to give them something to do.
Will they be allowed to practice pending what might happen?
So I think it's a good question about practicing. So we would want to start official practice when we know competitive play would take place, kind of like we talked about with the football. Once we know we're going to have, or we anticipate having competitive play, that's when practice would start. So right now on paper, December 14th is that day. So we would want to make appointments tonight in anticipation of the potential for that December 14th. Our next meeting is not till that day. So if we want our kids to be able to practice if permitted, we would make those appointments. If something was canceled outright and we made appointments tonight, then we would just simply rescind those appointments as the sport is not permitted. But we would be prepared for that December 14th start for those athletic contests, as long as, we continue to support that potential for opportunity if permitted. The key piece is this, I guess, is there any objection right now to continuing to move forward with what is permitted for districts to do? Does anybody object to not having something?
I'm okay.
Janine, you okay?
I'm okay.
Go forward.
Yes?
See what happens.
Mr. Marco? All right, so with the support of the board, we will move forward with our winter sports appointments that we think might happen tonight, and we can do those tonight in anticipation or hope that we'll be able to offer something this winter. Before we do that, I also just want to mention a club that's associated with that. One of the other low to moderate risk sports, although it's a club for us here, is the ski club. I've included in your packets today a copy of the Woods Valley permissions and safeties that are going to go in the Woods Valley, which is where we generally ski with our ski club once a week. This is something we've done annually. I can tell you as you look through that document, that the ski slopes are under strict regulations. They're aware of the schools that are coming. You can see in this document the safety precautions and the numbers that we would send in before we were coming that night, and so forth. One of the things I do want to mention to you, if skiing is permitted to happen and ski club is permitted and you would like us to move forward with that, I do see a potential for additional busing needs for that, especially if winter sports are prohibited in some places. You could have some students who normally participate in a sport that's not being allowed at that time that are skiers that would like to be a part of the ski club. I would still be under the state, or the district would still be under the same restrictions on busing that we are during the day. So when you look at that and the numbers, there may be the possibility of additional busing. Now, we have permitted our parents to take them. If they don't want them on the bus, that would be something we continue to do. With that being said, it's a little bit different because generally you're not a spectator for that. The parents are obviously a lot more willing because they're going to the game anyway take their children and stay and watch the game. So, you know, I wouldn't anticipate as much parent driving for ski club as you would for a sport that you spectate for. So that would be the one caveat to this whole thing, is that, I would anticipate a little more busing that would be needed for ski club once a week, if we decided to move forward. And that is permitted right now,
Is there only one night?
one night a week. Yeah. Was typically
We've
Thursday.
got 22 kids on a bus. Where do we put the equipment?
So Ray, typically, what do we do with the equipment?
If they have them in bags, they're able to sit in the seat. If not, they go in the luggage compartment.
How many kids are we talking?
Yeah, so I don't have a.
I mean, it would help if we knew,
Yeah.
there was a list of kids sign up, so we knew how many there were.
Yeah.
Usually go.
Yeah.
Usually go.
Say if there's no basketball, we're not
Yeah,
gonna
if
have a
there's-
basketball bus, then we will have a ski bus.
How many buses do we usually send?
Usually one.
If there's no other sports.
20-something, Mr. Ray, typically?
I'm gonna say closer to, it varies a lot because some of those kids that participate in ski club, if their sport hasn't started yet, then they'll do ski club. I've seen it as high as 40, almost 40 kids. I've seen it as low as a handful of kids.
Do we have the extra buses?
So, yeah, I mean, we could certainly bus, yeah, we certainly could, especially, and Janine just mentioned that, if we're not running buses for different other things as well, no indoor track, no, you know what I mean, we could. I just, if we're sending more than 22, you're gonna have two buses going to Woods Valley, that's all I just want you to be aware of. Anything, and that'll be just sort of dictated by the
You need like
numbers that
another
are.
adult too, right, to supervise?
Yeah, there's adult supervision that goes with it too.
Because if you only have one person advisor, you might need an assistant.
Yeah, sometimes we might do chaperone things with that,
You know what
and
I
so
mean,
forth,
just to
depending, yeah. We won't know, and I wish I could tell you that, I don't have any idea. I would say it would be similar if we're able to play our sports and things that we normally do, and it's a normal winter for us, because, the kids will play what they play in the winter, but just the sheer, I don't know, indoor track typically is in the afternoon, right after school, so probably a lot of the indoor track kids do the ski club, or do they leave right away after school? If you're on indoor track,
Yeah, they don't.
yeah, so keep that in mind, like, without indoor track, those kids and the numbers we have for indoor track, there's a potential that you have some skiers that normally wouldn't go to ski club on that, for example. Basketball teams are a little bit different, they're smaller, but an indoor track team's a little bit bigger. I would just say, I guess the bottom line is, I have no idea knowing what numbers, I would just anticipate it. If that's one of the things that's permitted this winter and we're doing it, I would expect at least somewhat of an increase in numbers for that.
There is some siblings there too.
Yep.
So that might help too with the busing situation. And I believe before I was here, they used to take two buses, or a bus and a truck or something.
So that's the only,
How many kids usually drive themselves? They don't drive themselves.
no, not usually.
If we knew how many parents were gonna take their
Yep.
kids, they didn't want them to ride, that would help also.
Yep.
There's gotta be a way that we can get them there.
Yep.
I mean, I hate to throw a ringer in it, but, here comes the elementary teacher. What about class trips? We just gonna tell them they can't have something? And we've gone, we're doing this all for sports and everything like that. Are we gonna do the same for the elementary?
Yeah, so what I've tried to do, and I've tried to present this to all of us, I've tried to stay pretty consistent with what we're doing. So really nothing indoors right now, with anything. So the ski club, it follow things that are permitted. So like, once the ski resorts were permitted to be open, and it's an outdoor activity, and that's permitted, and today that's considered, if we had a ski team, that would be permitted as a low to moderate risk. We're complying with the regulations saying we can do that. So we're staying in line with certain things that we can do that were within the regulations, and things that we can't do right now are not permitted to be done.
How many did they have last year?
So it varied, like Mr. Reed said. So we could have as much as 40 at a time, depending on the Thursday, yeah.
I think if you go with two buses, I would think that would be the limit. 44 kids, no more.
What time do they leave?
In the past, about 3:30, we were waiting for the elementary get out, because there was some younger kids that did go.
So let me add that piece. The elementary students that would typically would be able to go with that, some of the older would not be permitted. We wouldn't cross that this year. So I've already informed the ski club that we would keep that as a 7 through 12 situation. So that would, and that was a couple of kids, I think, in general.
Yeah, there wasn't a large number.
Out of the younger grades, so.
The other thing too is I think this year with the kids going every other day on the high school side, I think there'll be more parents that will have to probably bring their child over to there and bring them to school to catch a bus to go over. That's-
So here's where I can leave it tonight for everybody. I guess the first piece is, are we willing to open up the opportunity for people to go to Woods Valley for Ski Club? That's the first piece. And then from there, we can start to put together sort of numbers, and I can give you an update next month at the meeting as to, the average number of kids that we're looking at in terms of that. And if we want to decide on setting some sort of limit per night, we can talk about that a little bit too.
Maybe you could do like, if it's your day in school, you go that day, and then so it'd be every other week.
Yeah.
So we're, go too many.
Yep. So we can look at some things with that. There's also some restrictions from Woods Valley. So I'm not sure how many Woods Valley is going to permit us because they have a limit on how many can be at the slope itself. So there's some things, that we'll look into before now and next month. But I didn't want to get into too much of that because we have to confirm with Woods Valley that we're going to potentially do it. And then we can start to work on what we would permit after that, I guess.
If Woods Valley puts a limit on it, is there a possibility you could do a rotating, this group A, group B?
Yep. Yeah, so we may end up getting into something like that. Yeah.
I like that idea, but I wouldn't want to see someone that's been in ski club for 4 years or 3 years and get bumped for somebody that just.
Yes.
I would still like to see the kids that are traditionally going still have the opportunity. I wouldn't want to see those kids get bumped out just because there's more.
More kids wanting to do it. Yep. Understood. And I think, I always look at, things that are worst case, I may be overblowing this, maybe it'll just be fine and we'll be sending a couple of buses and that'll be.
We don't have any snow, others either.
Or if it stays 70, we don't even have anything.
I already said that. You
So.
have to snow first before we have a club.
So, is there anybody opposed then to at least moving forward with Ski Club and permitting it to happen as long as it's allowed? And working on the numbers and things? Everybody's in favor of that?
Yep.
Okay. So with that said, Mrs. Bartlett, if we want to go through and do the appointments at this point in time for the winter coaching
Okay.
and the Ski Club.
Okay. All right, a motion to approve David Smith, coach boys varsity basketball, step 4 of the extracurricular index of the WCVTA bargaining agreement. Pete first, Janine second, all in favor? Motion to approve Matt Sproul, coach boys JV basketball, step 2 of the extracurricular index of the WCVTA bargaining agreement. Carson first, Janine second, all in favor? Motion to approve Todd Hoban, coach boys modified basketball, 7th grade, step 4 of the extracurricular index of the WCVTA bargaining agreement. Shauna first, Pete second, all in favor? Motion to approve Todd Hoban, coach boys modified basketball, 8th grade, step 4 of the extracurricular index of the WCVTA bargaining agreement. Donna first, Carson second, all in favor. A motion to approve Shelley Hazard, coach girls varsity basketball, step 3 of the extracurricular index of the WCVTA bargaining agreement. Carson first, Shauna second, all in favor. Motion to approve Whitney Reddington, coach girls JV basketball, step 2 of the extracurricular index of the WCVTA bargaining agreement. Pete first, Janine second, all in favor. Motion to approve Glenn Minor, coach girls modified basketball, 7th grade, step 2 of the extracurricular index of the WCVTA bargaining agreement. Janine first, Carson second, all in favor. A motion to approve Glenn Minor, coach girls modified 8th grade, step 2 of the extracurricular index of the WCBTA bargaining agreement. Janine first, Pete second, all in favor? Motion to approve Corey Young's coach boys bowling, step 5 of the extracurricular index of the WCBTA bargaining agreement. Carson first, Janine second, and all in favor? A motion to approve Corey Young's coach girls bowling, step 5 of the extracurricular index of the WCBTA bargaining agreement. Shauna first, Janine second, all in favor? A motion to approve Patricia Lang Ski Club, step 5 of the extracurricular index of the WCBTA bargaining agreement. Pete first, Shauna second, all in favor? Okay, policy 5761, drug and alcohol testing for school bus drivers, other safety sensitive employees.
Okay, so if I may, like we did last month, I mentioned last month that we have some policy updates that are basically mandated regs. That's what I'm trying to get us through here in terms of getting us updated in those areas. So you have 3 policies here. You have 5761, drug and alcohol testing for school bus drivers and other safety sensitive employees, policy 6150, alcohol, drugs, and other substances for school personnel, and policy 7320, alcohol, tobacco, drugs, and other substances for students. So I'll start with the first one, which is 5761. You'll see on the top of your copy is the 2005 policy that's been in place, obviously, since then. If you look through and flip through a couple of pages, you will see the 2020 version of 5761. There is an edit to the top paragraph of this in terms of a change there. You can flip to the next page through. Again, all regulations in regards to our drug testing that we're required to do with our bus drivers, especially in these situations that are required, and all the annual rules that are associated with that. There is a typo on the 3rd page of this, which should say it's at 05/2020, just so you see that on this first policy. So this gives you an idea, without reading through every piece of it with you, the regulations that we have to follow in terms of drug testing bus drivers and so forth. Mr. Ray's here, so I can just kind of refer to you on this. This is done. Can you explain the process for that, Charlie?
Yeah, so any new driver, as they come in and we tested, it's always on. And then any driver that has an accident that is over the threshold, they'll also be drug tested, and they're also enrolled in a random drug test. They come quarterly and pull a number of staff that's in that system, and they, all in or select drug test them.
So this policy is associated with those, and all school districts have to follow this. So I'll answer any questions you have about that at all. If there is no questions, you have an opportunity to waive the second reading of this, and then you do have an opportunity to approve it. Are there any questions at all on this policy? First one.
Okay, motion to waive the second reading of policy 5761. Shauna first, Carson second, all in favor? And will we adopt all of them at once? or
Nope,
one
just,
at a time?
no, I'll do one at a time. So your motion to approve this one.
Okay, motion to approve policy 5761. Janine first, Shauna second, and all in favor. Okay, policy 6150.
Yep, so again, 2005 on the top of this one, alcohol, drugs, and other substances for school personnel. You will see if you flip to the second page of this, the prohibited conduct and the edits that are associated with this particular policy. They are all in color for you. I will point you to the bottom of page 1 where it says the designated individuals for the district. That will be the building principals. We will type that in there. So if you want to write that on the bottom of page 2, the designated individuals for the district are the building principals. This is in terms of providing services to anyone who is having issues with alcohol, tobacco, drugs, and other for our staff members. And we have BOCES services that help provide services for individuals who are having issues with that. If you flip to the next page, again, on the same piece of this, you'll see the information for related services. Again, there's a place for building principals there that you'll plug that into as well. And once we have this officially up and approved, this will all be typed and put.
The date will be changed to 2020.
Yes, and we'll update all the dates, yeah, because originally when it comes in, it comes in. So yeah, everything will be updated to 2020 updates. Any questions on this policy?
Okay, a motion to waive the second reading of policy 6150. Janine first, Carson second, and all in favor? Okay, a motion to approve policy 6150. Carson first, Shauna second, all in favor. Policy 7320.
Okay, the last one that we have that's related to alcohol, tobacco, drugs, and other substances is related to our student population. You'll see again, this one was updated in '08. As you flip through to toward the back of this, you'll see again the edits for the prohibited conduct. This is in line really with the other two policies that you'll be seeing. Again, you'll notice in here, you're going to plug in building principals into the space for the designated individuals. As Michael mentioned, we'll change that up top to 2020 to make that the appropriate date. A little bit of a shorter policy here, but again, related to the prohibiting of the alcohol, tobacco, drugs, and other substances, and the services if we do identify students that are having issues with any of these things, and how we assist them in getting better from it. Any questions on policy 7320, the required mandates for that?
Where does vaping fall into this, or don't they do that anymore?
Yeah, that's in here somewhere. Is vaping in here?
I'm looking at disciplinary measures, and there's no list there.
E-cigarettes, Mr. Kemmer.
Huh?
E-cigarettes, that's the other term for vaping.
Oh,
On that bottom,
okay.
e-cigarettes.
Thank you very much.
Old school.
I know they-
Knock it off.
E-cigarettes. Any other questions
Good luck,
on
you got an old school.
this policy?
I'm surprised you knew what
Motion
things
to,
were.
I'm sorry. Motion to waive the second reading of policy 7320. Carson first, Shauna second, all in favor? Okay, motion to approve policy 7320. Carson first, Shauna second, all in favor? Okay, budget calendar.
Okay, I mentioned this earlier in the meeting, included in your packet. We do this in November. You get your first draft of the budget calendar and the budget assumptions. For the most part, for tonight, there's no action on this tonight. But what we're looking for is some input on the schedule and the assumptions that are in here. If any changes need to be made to this, we'll make those, because next month you'll participate in the required approval of both of these as you start the budget process. So if you look at the first page, you have the budget calendar. You'll see December's budget workshop 1, where we approve the calendar and the assumptions. We look at our rate sheets, and we look at our bus replacement plans moving forward. January, February, and March are workshops 2, 3, and 4, with the potential for an additional meeting in March if needed. And with everything going on this year, who knows how many times we're going to have to meet if information continues to roll in for us during this year's budget process. But you'll get an idea of when we do each of these each month. This kind of aligns when we think we start to get some information on this. Those of you that, a lot of you have been a part of this budget process for a long time. Once we get to February, and by the time we get to March, we really get the idea of what the numbers are and what we're going to be doing with this. I'm not going to say anything that's going to be clear as day this year for any reason, but, this would be the calendar that we would follow though in terms of the schedule. Is there any questions with the calendar? The adoption would be budget workshop 5 in April, and then obviously the vote is in May. Is there anybody that has an issue or would like any adjustments to your budget calendar for this year?
I don't have a question about it, but with the bus replacement, when you talk to people out in the community, they're always like, they always have new buses. I can't think offhand, but with the form that you sent home to all the people for the budget, can you put like a little blurb on the bottom explaining that they're just like the process of the busing,
Mhm.
the bus replacement, because they're like, they just got a new bus, you know?
Yep.
Just kind of clarify that a little bit more so they can understand it.
Yep, so we'll talk about our bus replacement plan in January, but when we put that notice out, I'll do a little bit more, and I'll work with Mr. Ray, we'll do a little bit more.
You know what I mean,
clarifying.
just so the public knows a little bit more so that
Yep,
it's got
what's
a new
that?
bus last
It's
year.
on your lease right
Yeah.
now, just go over the lease.
Yeah, essentially, it's a pretty simple process, so I have no
Yeah.
problem explaining it to them.
Yeah, because
Yep.
like, when you're on the board,
Yep.
Anyway,
Yep, no problem at all.
they just gotta.
Yeah, you want, the old people don't understand it.
Yep,
Yeah,
understood. Yep, we'll do our best to explain it to them this year. All right, with that being said, the second page is the assumptions. Again, the proposed budget, I'll just kind of go through this with you a little bit. We'll follow the process that's outlined in the calendar. We'll seek to maintain all current programs and policies supported by the Board of Education. We'll seek to limit tax levy increases to a minimum within the proposed tax cap. We'll continue to study our enrollments, staff considerations for special education, specialists, classified staff, certification, enrollment, AIS, RTI, all those things that we need to do to support our students, and staffing considerations for any new programs that are focused upon preparing students for 21st century skills. Also, maintenance of the facilities and grounds, general maintenance needs must be recognized. Equipment and other related needs will be reviewed. The district will review appropriations for small and/or potential unanticipated needs that are going on so that we're ready for that. Long-term facility planning, we talked a little bit about that tonight, and we'll kind of review and assess where we are with that. The budget will be developed to include the facility used by members and organized groups around the community. Non-COVID times, that's a little bit more relevant than it is right now, but we always develop plans to allow for community use of the building. And the conclusion of the budget assumptions for 21-22 budget are the board's framework for determining the priorities. These are generally the frameworks in which we've worked under in terms of our budget. I know there's a lot of other variables associated with that fall under these this year and things that impact these things, but I if I was looking at this and reading it, it's a good framework for how to do the budget for sure. Any questions or comments or changes or updates to either of those documents, the assumptions or the calendar? Okay, so with that said, we'll get this all set for us, and next month you'll approve these, and we'll begin our budget process next month with our first workshop. Thank you.
Okay, we have the following announcements. November 25th through the 27th will be Thanksgiving recess. December 14th will be the next Board of Education meeting, and December 23rd through the 31st will be winter recess. Are there public comments? We don't have any. Public comments? Motion to adjourn.
How many do we have checking in?
Janine first.
Mrs. Boylan, how many people viewing tonight?
We're up to 24, but there's 15 now.
Okay, we were as high as 24 people.
Same.
Okay, motion to adjourn with Janine first, Shauna second, all in favor.